Victoria Terminus happens to be a Gothic revival building. The city, Mumbai or Bombay at that time as it was known, chose the kind of Gothic revival style which was endorsed by the governor Bartle Frey. All the buildings which were being constructed in the period of 1860s, that's post mutiny, when the country came under the crown. This became the official style because it was supposed to be the style which was prevalent at home, which is Great Britain, and Bombay being the gateway of India, it was logical that this style came to Mumbai. So it's a very fine example of Gothic revival, but it is very unique because it modifies Gothic revival on a very grand scale and introduces the dome, which comes for the first time in Bombay's skyline. If you really see Gothic revival buildings prior to that, let's start with Crawford Market, Secretariat, Rajabai Tower, Convocation Hall, High Court. All of these buildings were tall and emphasized on verticality using tower, turrets, spires. But this is a building which for the first time, which is symmetrical in shape, and you have a dome which sits into the center of the staircase, which rises up on a drum. Thereafter, the immediate buildings are the Anjuman Islam School, the Times of India, which are its neighbors, which is 1890s, 93 to be precise, and followed by GPO, Prince of Wales Museum, and so many other buildings. So the skyline of Mumbai changed to domes from there. And the idea is that you had such a large building which created that impact, and with such a tremendous space of appreciation, that you could not have missed the impact of VT Station. So it has been an important building which transforms the architecture and the urban design of the city. It looks like a commercial palace as someone would define it, or a cathedral, because it has stained glass, it has that quality of light. You walk in through the grand staircase, you experience that. So it was a combination of all these things, and I think it's beautifully achieved by Stevens in this particular case. You have to understand that when something is planned on this scale, it has to be executed and meticulously. So you had of course, the structural engineer, the railway engineers. The architect was the main person in charge, and then the work was contracted through supervisors and through the people. So these were the Indian people, and the craftsmen were certainly Indian, because you had just across the road the JJ School of Art, or the Bombay School of Art as then it was known, which were having students. It was founded in 1857, 1860s, and this building started in 74. So a lot of people were seeking employment, and they came in because there was tremendous work happening. And the period of 1860s to late 1870s was when maximum Mumbai's architecture was being, Victorian revival architecture was being built. There are some records of, at least in the case of the BMC building, we knew that the Telugu workers did this stone carving. We had different people. The wood carvers would have been from different caste and community. Many a times what we've seen, at least from records, were that many people who joined fine arts and painting and other things were Parsis. So there were things like that, which once if you research more, you come to know. There was iron work also which happened here, whereas the stained glass and other things were imported. Like many railway stations in the world which have become redundant, this is a railway station which is still continue to be in use, or rather more use, or kind of a thing, which is a very rare phenomenon. If you see many railway stations in US, or for that matter Paris and other places, the other transport systems have overtaken it, so you found them to be redundant and they've been put to different use. Whereas this would be one of the unique World Heritage sites where the footfall would be coupled to at least 100 World Heritage sites put together. So it's a very unique one in its case. A lot of things happened at the right time. The opening of the Suez Canal, the coming of the railways to India, that really transformed the entire connectivity and enhanced the trade, and brought about tremendous progress to the city vis-a-vis funds and finances. But specifically related to this, I think the connection to the rest of the part of the country, the suburban network, and I think in future the metro linking would be perhaps it becomes an major terminal, transport terminal hub to connect to this thing and catering to the 21st century, because now with the eastern corridor opening up, it's still serving the functions fine. And I think there was tremendous wisdom with the railways, because they acquired a lot of land. They still have a lot of land on the eastern side, which is the Wadi Bandar side, which is now going to be optimally used. You're hearing the opening of the Panvel CST corridor. So these are the things which should get integrated, and it should keep serving the purpose for which it was designed. So you have to understand that conservation is about 30 years old in our country. Basically, it was started with activism of people and various NGOs which were responsible for it. It's taken 10 to 15 years or 20 years for the government to wake up to the call of it, and it's certainly a prestigious thing. I think the Darjeeling railway station, the Darjeeling railway line came in first, and then that bottom out tremendous kind of excitement perhaps with the railways, and the railways then wanted to have CST nominated. They tried nominating it themselves in the first attempt, but since there are very strict procedures of UNESCO nomination, they sought help of Intact Mumbai chapter. That's where Mrs. Tasneem Mehta and myself helped the railways to do this. I think the railways did a very good thing of initiating a good study which was done prior to the nomination, which was done by the ACC research cell. And they produced a fabric status report, which which is a first-hand information of the status of the building and what needs to be done. And then there are priorities worked out of phases of work. Thereafter, the railways have been carrying out works of cleaning the building and repairing it and trying to improve upon this. Many a times you've seen that the building has been cleaned time and again and on the same facades, because when you're traveling on the road, you can see it. As a purist, you would like to see it being done with very professional, careful approach, because it's a grade 1, and especially now it's a World Heritage Site. What happens to any World Heritage Site which is important is that we do follow the international systems which are laid down, and in this case the guidelines laid by ECOMOS should have been followed, or should be followed. And we also need to introduce good monitoring systems. So we had suggested the formation of 2 level committees. One is a high power committee, and one is the local level committee where inputs could be given. None of the committees got appointed, because we had instituted 2 committees. One is a high powered committee, where you have all the stakeholders involved. The idea is that the municipal commissioner, the traffic in charge, the Bombay Port Trust, all these people are a part of it, because anything which we have to do, the idea is that CST is the lifeline, the railways are the lifeline of the city. And of course, you're having things which are changing. 20 years ago, the eastern waterfront was seen with a different role, and now it can assume a different role. So you have to plan things which will help in benefiting the city, and for that you need a larger stakeholder committee. So that was one which was recommended. The second one was a smaller committee which is specifically got to do with the building and its conservation, where it was said that you'll have parties who are experts on conservation also an integral part of this thing, so that we can monitor whether the work is happening right. So what we had suggested in the surrounding buffer zone was that no building should go taller than the concourse height of the ridge height of the concourse. The idea is that we endorse all the uses of transportation and other things for which the railways are there, to have things of that nature. But we were against, by and large, the commercial developments, because once that starts happening, the sanctity of the site, and that overpowers the main site. What we had heard, and of course there was proposals, and it was there in the press also, that the railways wanted to make it into they were talking of these world-class railway stations. And in that there was a good component of conservation, but this component of conservation was related to some amount of commercial development which would happen in the open spaces. The scale of that was really very loud, personally, according to me as an individual, because the scale of buildings were commercial and they were fairly tall. Like ground plus one of the building, an iconic tower, was supposed to be very tall, ground plus 30 or 40, something like that. Now this certainly would have competed with CST railway station, the main building itself. If you just go to England and see St. Pancras railway station, you also have a similar site and a similar interesting building, but if you really see, they've connected, the new station has been done which connects to Paris, which is amazing because you have an activity which is still of the same nature, and the buildings are very sensitively designed in the same scale, so they've not gone taller. So the idea is that it's not necessarily that tall developments, high rises are the only alternatives. The railways have taken the task of doing some things which were recommended in the reports, of breaking additions and alterations which were not sensitive to the original ones. So that way it's a very positive thing. But having said this, it can be done more sensitively with the help of right professional approach and good monitoring, as that's what idea is to set a high standards of conservation. See, frankly, the heritage is the lowest component in our thing, or rather it's completely ignored. So it's tucked somewhere as RAC. It should get a proper berth. Then only you will be able to respect what we've inherited. And once you look after it well, the others will look after it. A classic example is, you see the metro stations. They are so well kept and they're so this thing. But unfortunately, if we also manage to restore it and give it that grandiousness and things like that, I'm sure people would respect and would care for it. Majority of what we find, that people who come to the station, using the station, do not know the richness of it. Now, the idea is that everyone is pressed to time, they all want to catch their seats and other things, but if you have something which is educative in nature at the platform, if they're waiting for it to make you understand or aware, like something which is missing in our country is the help of volunteers. If volunteers would have been there to explain to people like what is the significance of the building and show the details, that's what brings a lot of change. What you find abroad is that there are many volunteers who do this kind of a job. So it's not the job of the railways, but it's the job of the citizens to explain the importance and significance of such a spectacular building. This would be the only other 19th century building apart from House of Parliament to be individually listed as a World Heritage Site, which we've not capitalized on.